Kia ora koutou. My name is Kate and I'm here tonight with Fertility New Zealand. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's webinar on fertility and nutrition with fertility dietitian Claudia Vavasour. For those of you who are not familiar with Fertility New Zealand, we're a registered charity and we walk alongside all people facing fertility challenges. We have a dedicated helpline and we provide support, information and guidance to anyone at any stage of their journey. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram and LinkedIn. We encourage you to become a member. Membership is free. It gives you free access to our online forums. And by joining Fertility New Zealand, you support the valuable work we do for New Zealanders experiencing fertility issues. Please do go along and check out our website. For more information, you download our free fertility fact sheets or watch our pre-recorded webinar series at your own leisure. I'm delighted to introduce you tonight to our presenter, Claudia Vavasour. Claudia is a fertility dietitian at Fertility Nutrition. Claudia is a leading certified fertility and pregnancy dietitian, and she works with clients virtually. If you have any questions or comments, please type them into our chat box and Claudia will respond to your questions at the end of the presentation, including any questions from Facebook Live. So welcome to everybody on Facebook. Thank you for joining us tonight and we hope you enjoy the webinar. Over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Kate. It's such a privilege to be here presenting to you all this evening on a topic which I am incredibly passionate about. As Kate mentioned, I'm a certified fertility and pregnancy dietitian. And I work virtually in my practice, Fertility Nutrition, with a team of fertility and pregnancy dietitians. So today's presentation is around how nutrition can optimize your fertility and wellness. And I'm going to share with you 3 really important reasons why we should be prioritizing nutrition prior to conception and when we're trying to conceive. And these really are actually the 3 reasons why I started my practice, because I believe so vehemently in these points. So the first one we're going to cover off is the first 1,000 days, which may ring a bell. Also epigenetics is another term. We're going to talk about the egg and sperm quality and how we can improve the health of egg and sperm for optimal fertility outcomes. And we're also going to talk about mood and nutrition, so your overall wellness. Many clients I see through going through their fertility journey are on such a roller coaster, and we'll delve into some of the stats around that and also some of the research around mood and food. At the end, I'm going to give you my top 5 evidence-based nutrition strategies for you to make today to take home and implement to help you on your journey. And then at the end, as Kate mentioned, we've got some questions which I'll be able to answer. So I wanted to start with a quote. It's an old Chinese proverb: "Those who take medicine but neglect their diet will be wasting their time and their doctor's skills." And I really wanted to highlight this point around supplementation, because often what is happening is that people are taking 1 trillion different supplements to optimize their fertility. They've heard through a friend's, cousin's, neighbor that they took this wonderful supplement and and then they fell pregnant. And so often people are on a whole lot of supplements because they're hoping that it's going to be beneficial. However, what I'm going to highlight to you all tonight is how important nutrition is in the food that we eat. So we can't just take a pill, it's a whole diet approach. Right, so firstly, what is a a dietitian, and particularly a fertility dietitian? Well, dietitians in New Zealand are registered with the New Zealand Dietitians Board, and we partake in the annual continuing competency program. To be a New Zealand registered dietitian, you have to have a Bachelor of Science in Human Nutrition or equivalent, and you have to have either a postgraduate diploma in dietetics, or which is now a Master's in Dietetics. So we're legally bound by the HPCA Act, and that is to provide safe and evidence-based nutrition advice, and that's the same act that actually governs doctors. Now, the term nutritionist is an unregulated term, and I think this is can be a lot of can be part of the issue with a lot of misinformation that is available, because anybody can call themselves a nutritionist, and a nutritionist can't call themselves a dietitian. So as you can see, dietitians have to undergo a huge amount of training and tertiary education. Certified fertility dietitians undergo further training, and that's usually with Nutrition Plus, which is an Australian-based organisation. And only dietitians are able to undertake medical nutrition assessments. So what you want to look for in New Zealand is the letters NZRD when you're looking for someone to give you nutrition advice. And asking, are they a dietitian or are they a nutritionist? Because there is a big difference. So in terms of a medical nutrition assessment, I just wanted to briefly go through this. So when we first see a client as a dietitian, we undertake a medical nutrition assessment, and it's a personalized nutrition assessment. So we determine exactly what you need to eat to optimize your fertility. So we look at your medical history, your medication, your nutrition supplements. We look at your blood test results, see what tests have been done, and determine need for further tests. We look at your anthropometry, which is your weight, your height, your BMI, your weight history, body fat percentage. We look at your fertility history, menstrual cycles. We also do a gut health assessment, look at your physical activity, obviously your food intake, also some sort of other aspects such as your goals and roadblocks, because often it's not just knowing what to eat, it's actually implementing that in life. And that can be really challenging, and we all have ruts with our food and our routine and our healthy habits, and so we look at those things as well. Now, I wanted to point out here that often I hear that someone might be seeing a doctor around fertility, and then the doctor says you don't need to see a dietitian because you've got a healthy BMI. Well, BMI is just one measure that we look at to determine a person's nutrition status. So you cannot determine whether or not someone is meeting their nutrition requirements purely based on a BMI. So really to understand whether or not you are meeting your nutrition needs and your nutrition is adequate, we need to undertake an assessment. Right, so 3 reasons why nutrition is so important prior to conception. The first one is the first 1,000 days. So let's get into this. So early life nutrition is the period of time from preconception through to toddlerhood, also known as the first 1,000 days. So what happens during that window is that you have epigenetic changes to the DNA. So your mother and your father both give you equal amount of chromosomes, and that makes up your DNA. So epigenetics does not change your DNA, but it is able to influence whether a gene is turned on or off. And I want to use the Dutch famine as an example. So in September 1944, trains in the Netherlands ground to a halt. Dutch railway workers were hoping that a strike could stop the transport of Nazi troops, helping the advancing Allied forces. But the Allied campaign failed, and the Nazis punished the Netherlands by blocking food supplies, plunging much of the country into famine. By the time the Netherlands was liberated in May 1945, more than 20,000 people had died from starvation. The Dutch hunger winter has proved unique in unexpected ways because it started and ended so abruptly. It has served as an unplanned experiment in human health. Pregnant women, it turns out, were uniquely vulnerable, and the children they gave birth to had been influenced by famine throughout their lives. That was an excerpt out of the New York Times in 2018. And so the Dutch famine is this unique time period where we can look at the outcomes of people following that experience. And people who had been in utero during the Dutch famine were more overweight than average. And in middle age, they had higher levels of triglycerides and LDL cholesterol, so that's your bad cholesterol. They had higher rates of conditions such as metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and schizophrenia, and they experienced a 10% increase in mortality after 68 years. So really, the Dutch famine really paved the way for epigenetic research, and really highlighted that, you know, there is this critical window of development from preconception up into toddlerhood where the nutrition environment or our diets or the nutrition quality of our diet can influence whether or not someone goes on to develop diabetes or heart disease, and has susceptibility for other diseases. So it's incredibly interesting. So, you know, when we're looking at the first 1,000 days, we're really looking at that 1 month prior to conception. However, more recent research shows that the health and lifestyle of the mother and the father, at least 3 months, that's 90 days before they conceive a baby, is essential. So there's really there's a bit of debate around when the first 1,000 days actually starts, and it's at least 1 month prior to conception. And we're going to talk a little bit about egg health and the process of egg maturation, and that might give us a few more clues as to why it's more than 1 month prior to conception, where nutrition has such a significant impact on future offspring outcomes. So to summarize the first 1,000 days, it's the first 1,000 days of a baby's life provides a critical window or a golden window of opportunity where a healthy environment, in particular your diet and lifestyle, can positively influence lifelong health. So that's my number one reason why nutrition is so important prior to conception. Now, the next reason is because it can have an impact on sperm and egg quality. So people often say to me, but aren't we born with all the eggs that we ever have? Yes, absolutely we are. And however, what happens is we have this process of meiosis, which is basically where immature egg follicles develop into a mature egg ready to be released at ovulation. And that process is around a 3-month process. And during this time, the maturing oocyte, or the egg, is sensitive to environmental and dietary factors, which can actually impact the genetic material of the egg. So when you are if you're going through IVF and you're making embryos, having eggs retrieved, the 3 months prior is actually really important, because we need to protect that egg from environmental exposures that can impact the DNA integrity. So some of the environmental factors impacting egg health. So some of these are outside of our control, but oxidative stress is a big one. And it's becoming more and more prevalent in our very busy lifestyles. So this is caused by pollution. So we've got personal care products, we've got BPA plastics, we've got pesticide residues and air pollution, we've got obesity, smoking, alcohol, and also psychological stress. And these significantly impact upon egg health. Age, we know that as a woman ages, an increased percentage of eggs contain genetic abnormalities. So we do know that the biggest impact on egg quality is age, and we can't do anything about age. So it makes the factors that are modifiable, the things that we can control, even more important. And on age, once that DNA damage has occurred, it can't be repaired. And we're talking here in that 3-month window of egg maturation. So excess body fat is another environmental factor impacting egg health, and studies have found that overweight or obese women undergoing fertility treatment had abnormally high levels of fat and inflammation in the fluids surrounding the eggs, and the eggs were found to have more disorganized DNA. So what are some of the dietary factors which impact egg health? Now, there's quite an important one called AGEs, and that's an acronym for Advanced Glycation End Products, which is something you may or may not have heard of. Now, what on earth are they? They're toxic end products that cause oxidative stress, and they can accumulate in our system as we get older. We know that there are elevated levels in the serum and follicular fluid of women who have got reduced ovarian response, and that high levels of AGEs in those areas result in a reduced chance of pregnancy. So where on earth do we get AGEs from? Well, we get AGEs from cooking at high temperatures, so barbecuing. So when you, as a child, I vividly remember asking for the more charcoaled sausage, and that is basically a prime example of AGEs. So overcooking food and cooking at really high temperatures, resulting in burning. So we do want to go for more slow cooking methods and lower temperatures, so avoiding those high temperatures. Antioxidants. So if you think about oxidative stress and oxidative damage and what that does, and antioxidants act like sponges to mop up that kind of oxidative stress that's occurring in our lives every day. So every day we've got this kind of internal balance going on between factors which are causing oxidative stress and what we're putting in our body to provide antioxidants to help combat that oxidative stress. Now, if we don't have that balance right and we've got too much oxidative stress, what we get is that oxidative damage, and then that will go on to damage the DNA within our eggs. So having a diet rich in antioxidants is absolutely critical, and research shows that they can that we can actually counter oxidative stress by increasing antioxidant intake. But before you rush off and buy a whole lot of antioxidant supplements, think back to the Chinese proverb around the whole diet, and getting antioxidants from food is the best way to get antioxidants and the benefit from them. Another dietary factor impacting egg health is the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So we know that diets rich in omega-3 fats prolong reproductive function into advanced maternal age, which is good. And conversely, a diet rich in omega-6 fatty acids is associated with poor reproductive success at advanced maternal age. So a little bit about what omega-3 and omega-6 fats are. They're both polyunsaturated fats, which are essential, meaning that we have to have them in our diet, otherwise we'll get a deficiency. Some researchers believe that omega-6 fats are pro-inflammatory, whilst omega-3s are anti-inflammatory. The Western diet, the problem is that the Western diet has become we're getting an abundance of omega-6 fatty acids in our diet and less omega-3. So it's kind of this ratio, which is the problem. It's not that one specifically is good and that one specifically is bad. It's more the amount of the different types of fats that we're getting and that are prevalent in a Western diet. So, if we're looking at the richest sources of omega-6s, they are in your processed vegetable oils. So sunflower, corn, soybean, and cottonseed oils are some of the fats which have the highest amount. And then with our omega-3s, the best sources of those are oily fish, as well as some plant sources such as flaxseed, walnuts, chia seeds. Now, if you are concerned about your omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, the simple guide for improving that ratio of the omega fats, I've got 3 tips. So 1, avoid vegetable oils high in omega-6 and the processed foods that contain them. So having a look at the ingredient list and keeping your eyes peeled for the sunflower, corn, soybean, and cottonseed oils. Number 2 is eat plenty of omega-3 rich foods, such as your including something from the sea at least once or twice a week, and if needed, a supplement with an omega-3 source like fish oil. Great. So that is egg health. We're going to move on to sperm health now. So spermatogenesis begins at puberty and is the process whereby male germ cells multiply, divide, and mature into male gametes known as spermatozoa. The entire process takes around approximately 74 days. So I talked about egg maturation taking approximately 3 months. Sperm maturation effectively is slightly less at 74 days. And I think that when we're looking at that first 1,000 days prior to conception, what I see is how much of an impact that nutrition can have on improving, IVF outcomes, particularly improving quality of embryos. And, we start to see in practice that actually it's likely to be more than that 1 month prior to conception. It's more likely a minimum of 3 months to see that benefit. So it's a really interesting area. Right, so factors impacting sperm health: obesity, and also low BMI and undernutrition. So large population-based studies in men have shown that having a high BMI increases the risk of infertility. So there's good evidence to show that. The evidence shows that also the low BMI, so it's kind of a U-shaped curve. And studies have shown that with undernutrition, where we have iron deficiency anemia, as well as deficiencies in vitamin C, D, E, and selenium, are also associated with reduced sperm quality and infertility in men. Now, one of the issues we have with our Western diets today is that they tend to be really energy dense, so they give us a lot of calories, but they're not giving us many nutrients. So we can actually be overweight but undernourished, and that is it's more prevalent, and it's not always appropriate or obtainable to test nutrient markers, but we may not have an overt deficiency, but we're certainly not meeting our daily requirements for micronutrients. Other factors impacting sperm health are the intake of trans and saturated fats. Now, historically in New Zealand, we've been quite lucky. We've had quite low levels of trans fats in our diets across the population. However, with more and more products coming on the market, I'm seeing that start to change, and I'm starting to see, some of these plant-based ice creams and desserts, which are marketed as a really healthy alternative. They contain hydrogenated vegetable oils, which results in trans fats, and we don't actually in New Zealand have to label our food with the amount of trans fat in it. It's legal requirement on the nutrition information panel to include the amount of saturated fat, but not trans fat. And trans fats are something we really want to minimize. So, a recent systematic review, the studies consistently demonstrated a negative association between trans and or saturated fatty acid intake and either total sperm count, sperm concentration, or both. So those types of fats are not ideal. And we get those from processed foods primarily, as well as animal fats, so butter, full fat, high cream, also processed red meats are very high in saturated fats, the visible fat that you can see. But mainly processed foods will be your biggest source. They have a lot of hidden saturated fat. Processed red meat is a problem, and it's been shown to have a negative impact on sperm quality in both fertile and infertile men. And it also appears that the unprocessed meat intake doesn't affect sperm quality in men, suggesting that it's the other factors that are involved in the processing of meat which are a problem. So it's good news, because the steak can stay, but the bacon buddies have got to go. It's not all bad news. In regards to sperm health, the Mediterranean dietary pattern has been found to be positively associated with total sperm count and motility. So the good news is that there is a way of eating, a pattern of eating, which has a really good impact and can help improve sperm quality. So making 5 or more diet and lifestyle changes can improve fertility by 69%. So, this sums up the egg and sperm quality point. So the second reason why nutrition prior to conception is so important is because not only can it influence your future offspring's health outcomes, but by making 5 or more diet and lifestyle changes, you can improve your fertility by up to 69%. And that's research out of Harvard School of Public Health. And later in the presentation, I will dive into some of my top tips around 5 changes for you guys to make. So the third point I want to highlight, or the third reason, if I haven't convinced you already that nutrition prior to conception is really, really important, the third one might. So the third one is around our mood and the gut-brain connection. So firstly, what is the gut-brain connection? So the gut-brain connection is a bidirectional pathway between our gut and our brain. And what we eat, and in our gut, we have this thing called the gut microbiome, which I'm sure you've heard of. It's bandied around quite a lot. And what we eat influences the type of bacteria in your microbiome, in our microbiome. And gut bacteria play an essential role in our health. There can be good bacteria and not so good bacteria. We know that the good bacteria reduce inflammation and improve nutrient absorption. The right balance between the healthy and less healthy species must exist in order for the microbiome to flourish. And having the presence of healthy bacteria actually protect the lining of your intestines and provide a strong barrier against toxins and bad bacteria. And the bacteria activate neural pathways and travel directly between the gut and the brain. So basically, the way I like to explain it is that, if we're eating a Mediterranean style diet, we promote more healthy species in our microbiome, and they release gases, which have a chemical cascade throughout the body and actually send signals to the brain. On the flip side, a Western style diet, a diet really high in saturated fat and processed foods, can mean that the less healthy species are are dominant, and they can have an inflammatory cascade throughout the body. And actually, some of those less healthy species actually eat on the gut lining. So, it is worth sparing a wee thought for our gut bugs when we're choosing our foods. So that's a little bit about what the gut brain connection and the gut microbiome is, very high level. And the reason why it's relevant prior to conception is because of the association between our gut microbiome and our mood. And unfortunately, stress, depression, and anxiety are common consequences of infertility. And a number of studies have found the incidence of depression in infertile couples presenting for infertility treatment is significantly higher than in fertile controls. And prevalence estimates are ranging for major depression are ranging from anywhere from 15 up to 54%, which is huge. Anxiety has also been shown to be significantly higher in infertile couples when compared to the general population. And I've got some information here on the statistics of, what are the rates of, depression amongst New Zealand adults. We've got 14%, women is 18%, and you can see infertility treatment 15 to 54%, and also much higher with anxiety. Now, why is this significant? Well, depression in pregnancy strongly predicts postnatal depression, and it is the leading cause of leading cause of health loss for New Zealanders, accounting for 5.3% of health loss. That we want to do all that we can to prevent a new mother from experiencing postnatal depression. And if nutrition is a modifiable factor that can help with that, then that's a great thing. And we're really lucky with the publication of the SMILES trial, which was a study done in Australia recently in 2019. It was a randomized controlled trial. It was the first of its kind, and it showed that what they did is they had two groups, a dietary intervention group and a befriending group. And the reason why they did that is because they wanted to ensure that the improvements or the outcomes weren't impacted by the person-to-person contact. So the results showed that participants in the diet group, and they were following a modified Mediterranean style diet, they had a much greater reduction in depressive symptoms compared to those in the social control group. So it was a third versus 8% reached depression remission. And those who improved their diet the most experienced the greatest benefit to their depression. So it was an amazing study which really showcased the impact that nutrition can have on a person's mood. So, part of this webinar is talking about nutrition and wellness through your fertility journey. And nutrition is a way that we can really look after ourselves and nurture ourselves and support our mood, because it's an absolute roller coaster. And anyone who's been through a fertility journey I have no doubt will agree. So to summarize, my 3 reasons why nutrition is so important prior to conception is that the first 1,000 days provides a critical window of opportunity where a healthy environment, namely diet and lifestyle, can positively influence lifelong health. Number 2, making 5 or more diet and lifestyle changes can improve fertility by 69%. And 3, diet is a modifiable risk factor for depression. And clinical trials have shown that we can reduce the onset and the severity of depression by following a modified Mediterranean diet. So let's look at 5 key changes. Now, I'm going to work through these, and I'm sure you'll have questions at the end of the presentation, but my 5 top tips to optimize your fertility and your wellness are here. So number 1, ensure that you're getting enough folate. So The amount needed, the amount of folate that you need will change from woman to woman. So the amount in your supplement may not necessarily be adequate for you. There are certain medications and conditions which mean that we have higher folate requirements. Not getting enough folate can mean that your baby's neural tube isn't developing properly, which can result in either a miscarriage or a chemical pregnancy, where your baby doesn't survive past 5 weeks. On the other side, we also don't want too much folic acid, because too much throughout the latter stages of your pregnancy have been associated with an increased risk of autism. So it's important that we get a minimum of 400 micrograms of folic acid prior to conception, but for some people they will have much higher requirements. And it's also important to ensure that you're getting enough folate in your diet too. So top folate sources include spinach, dark green leafy vegetables, romaine lettuce, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, beans, peanuts, sunflower seeds, fresh fruits, and fruit juices. So they are great sources of dietary folate. So if a supplement is absolutely important. Getting the right supplement, the right dose for your needs is important. So talk to your healthcare provider around what that looks like for you, and then make sure your diet's rich in folate foods as well. Okay, number 2. Excuse me. So number 2, we want to reduce our insulin levels with a low glycemic index diet. So the hormone insulin, it has a domino effect on our fertility hormones. So if your insulin distribution is high or erratic, this can significantly impact your ability to conceive. And I have to say that this is one of the biggest issues I see in my practice, is particularly women are having very inconsistent carbohydrate intakes and inconsistencies in the type of carbohydrate that we eat, in terms of the quality. So it's very important that we include carbohydrate in our diet. So low carbohydrate diets like a keto diet have no place when we're trying to conceive, because we need to have that consistent supply of energy, and consistent supply of insulin to support reproductive hormones. And this is really important if you have PCOS. So you need to ensure that you're having the right types of carbohydrates in the right quantities at the right times. And that will change from woman to woman, but making sure that you don't skip meals is a really important part of that, and trying to have the same amount of carbohydrate or a relatively same sort of portion size at each meal will help. Number 3 is to include plant-based proteins in your diet, and this is a biggie. In terms of how much exercise you're doing, that can influence how much plant protein you need, but plant protein can be as simple as switching 25 grams of animal protein for plant protein a day. So if you're having like a wee nourish bowl for dinner, you might want to add a quarter of a cup of edamame beans to that meal as a way of getting some plant-based protein. If you're having a spaghetti bolognese, you could add some chickpeas or some lentils or some red kidney beans to that dish. It doesn't have to be that you have a completely vegetarian meal. And a lot of people listening will need to be having family-friendly meals. They might have fussy spouses, and I know I certainly do. So, rest assured you don't have to go to a completely plant-based or vegetarian diet. We just want to be including some more plant-based protein sources in your diet, and that can be as part of a traditional hearty meal. Number 4, and we have talked about this, is around optimizing your fat ratio. So the types of fats that we eat can influence the fluid surrounding your eggs, and also how receptive your uterus is to an embryo. So look at the types of fats that you're eating, and whether or not you're having too much of the omega-6s over the omega-3s. When was the last time you ate some seafood? Are you taking an omega-3 supplement? And the main cooking oil I'd recommend that you use to support your omega-3 to omega-6 ratio would be extra virgin olive oil. And number 5, which might be surprising, is to drink full-fat cow's milk. Now, it's a really interesting one. The latest research suggests that it may be due to a compound called IGF-1 in cow's milk, which helps early embryo growth. So having whole fat cow's milk is really important, particularly if you're going through IVF. For some people who have metabolic disease or a very high BMI, this should probably be individually tailored by a dietitian so that you're getting the right advice for your needs. But as a general rule, the evidence to date is showing that whole fat dairy products seem to be more positively associated with fertility outcomes. So they are the top 5 tips for you guys to incorporate. Now, I do have a lot of information on my website, fertilitynutrition.co.nz. So please have a look at the website, have a look at the information that we have there. There's a lot of content on social media pages, so Fertility Nutrition Dietitians on Instagram and Fertility Nutrition NZ at Facebook. So if you are thinking that you would like a personalized medical nutrition assessment, then we would love to help you on your fertility journey. We've worked with hundreds of women, and it never ceases to amaze me the impact that good nutrition has on people's fertility outcomes. So there's a team of us at Fertility Nutrition, and please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. And if your questions don't get answered tonight, we'd be more than happy to help. So I will hand back over to Kate. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. Thank you, Claudia. That was really a really great presentation, and you did an amazing job there as well. So very
Thank you.
And I've got a few things there that I know to change for myself as well. I see we've got one question coming through. So I do invite everybody now, if you've got questions, please start sending them through. And Claudia will help you from here. I will just go back in the background again, Claudia, but if you need me, I'll come back on.
Okay, thank you, Kate. Right, so I have a question here. How long will it take to make a difference for my fertility if I make some changes? It's kind of like asking how long is a piece of string. So I do recommend that 3-month window due to how long it takes to optimize egg health. But in saying that, there's so many factors that I would need to assess in an assessment to understand what's going on in your particular situation, because egg health and eggs make up only 50% of the fertility equation. Sperm health is equally as important. So what's going on there, and so we'd need to look at both parties and look at what's going on overall for you, and what are the things that are impacting your fertility from a nutrition perspective. If it was someone wanting to achieve weight loss and they were wanting to achieve quite significant weight loss, then we may need to consider, depending on your age, of course, actually bringing your weight down a little bit and then having a buffer of a minimum of 6 weeks where you don't have rapid weight loss, because that can downregulate your reproduction. So from a clinical experience perspective, I've had clients who've benefited, the first review, they've come back and said, oh my God, I've had all these changes, my PMS has significantly improved. So they've had significant improvements in their reproductive health. But when it comes to other clients, it might take a lot longer, and that perseverance and that persistence and making changes and being able to stick to achievable changes 80% of the time is really what makes a difference in the end. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. So keto and intermittent fasting are no-goes, ? So yeah, basically, I do not recommend doing the ketogenic diet or fasting when you're actively trying to conceive. They can down-regulate your reproduction and actually make it harder for you to conceive. Whilst keto and intermittent fasting for some people can be beneficial for achieving weight loss, we don't want rapid weight loss when we're trying to conceive. It needs to be really safe and gradual. And so if you are following a keto diet, you really need to very slowly reincorporate carbohydrate back into your diet, but I would recommend that you work with a fertility dietitian around this so that you don't get rapid weight gain from being on a low carb diet to all of a sudden eating carbs again. Good question. How do we find out what our individual folate requirements are? Good question, Catherine. So I recommend that you either work with a fertility dietitian or you speak to your GP or your fertility specialist. They should be able to advise you if you have a higher need for folate. So some of the instances where a higher folate supplement is required are celiac disease, Crohn's disease, obesity, if we're taking certain medications like medications for epilepsy, so they and also if you have diabetes, so they in a family history of neural tube defects or spina bifida would mean that you would need a higher dose. Yeah, but I would speak to your health professional about that. Right, best foods to help with low estrogen and low progesterone. So if you head on over to my Instagram page, Fertility Nutrition Dietitians, we've got lots of tips and posts around these sorts of things. But bearing in mind that that's very general advice because it's about understanding what your root cause is and what is your cause for having low progesterone and low estrogen. Is it because you've got low body fat? Is it because you're over exercising, or is it other factors? So part of doing a nutrition assessment is really understanding what your individual requirements are for your fertility concerns and your fertility issues, in terms of supporting progesterone, including plant protein, and having, following that Mediterranean diet is a great way to support progesterone production, and particularly those low glycemic index carbohydrates are really important, not to be underestimated. It sounds simple, but it has such a big impact. How does endometriosis and adenomyosis affect fertility? Which part of the process does it affect, and how can diet help? So that's a really good question. And whilst I'm not a doctor, I will do my best to answer that question. So endometriosis is effectively an inflammatory condition. So it contributes to high levels of oxidative stress. It can also mean high levels of circulating estrogen. So diet has a really important role in helping to reduce inflammation and support estrogen excretion so that we're not recycling estrogen and ending up with kind of this overload of estrogen in the body. Also with endometriosis, there can be a lot of gut issues, like IBS can go hand in hand with endometriosis. So there is a lot that we can do to support a healthy digestive system. And also there seems to be an interplay between the microbiome of not only our gut, but also our uterine, potentially our vaginal microbiomes in women who are less fertile, and also in women who have endometriosis and women who have PCOS. So there's a lot of work that we do as dietitians, and it's a special interest of mine around optimizing your microbiome in those particular areas. So that's using the correct strain of probiotic and then ensuring that we're getting sufficient prebiotic fiber to help those particular strains of bugs to proliferate in the certain microbiomes. We know that there's a potential interplay between an implanting embryo and our uterine microbiome and the role of recurrent miscarriage. And we know that recurrent miscarriage can be an issue for women with endometriosis. So yeah, diet plays a role. It's an important pillar. And like anything, diet is not the be all and end all. There's no guarantee that eating a certain food is going to result in a baby, but what we do know is that it's a modifiable factor and it has a significant impact. Yeah. So ideal BMI bracket for transfer / best chance of implantation. So this is an interesting question. So it's not necessarily all about your BMI. It's more to do with the percentage of body fat. So too little body fat and too much body fat can have a detrimental impact on your fertility. If you're planning for a transfer, now is not the time to making drastic changes to your weight to try and fit within that BMI category. What's more important is your body fat percentage. So making sure that you're doing appropriate amounts of exercise, not too much, not too little, and following that Mediterranean style diet to optimize implantation. So how does type 2 diabetes come into play with adjusting diet when trying to conceive when you have a BMI of 32? So this is probably getting a little bit too individual. So I would need to do a nutrition assessment to give you really accurate and effective nutrition advice. But generally speaking, what happens with type 2 diabetes is that we have a lot of insulin resistance. And when we have a lot of insulin resistance, it has a massive impact on our reproductive hormones. So what's important really is to focus on that consistent carbohydrate intake. So looking at the types of carbohydrate that you eat and how much carbohydrate that you're having across a day, and moving your body, even if it's a 30-minute walk. But I think what would be important is to set some goals which feel achievable for you. So, if you're not doing any walking, it might be that you're going to walk 15 minutes 3 days a week and gradually build that up. So just really setting some achievable goals to start with to help you on that journey, and seeking some support from a dietitian would be really beneficial. What I also would say is that you should speak to your doctor around medications and interactions with your need for higher folate. So how does endo and adeno affect fertility? I think we've had a very similar question. And is eating for two really a myth? I love it. Do you need to modify your diet often throughout pregnancy? So it's a great question. So eating for two. Yes, you're eating for two, but not from a calorie perspective. So your calorie requirements in your first trimester don't increase. They increase only gradually, slightly in your second trimester and a little bit more in your third trimester. So calorie-wise, no, but nutrient-wise, needs for certain nutrients increase in pregnancy. So we need to be smarter about what we're eating. So yes, you do need to modify your diet throughout pregnancy. You need to modify it because there are food safety principles that we need to look at, because we don't want to get listeria, which is more prevalent in pregnancy and can result in the unfortunate termination of a pregnancy. So food safety is really important. So that's an important modification. You do need to consider where you're getting your increased nutrient requirements from. So key nutrients which increase are folate, iron, choline, iodine, omega-3s, calcium, protein. So they're just to name a few. So really, if you really want to meet your nutrition requirements, looking at the Ministry of Health website, also considering working with a pregnancy dietitian to help you in this time to meet your needs, because it can be a bit of a minefield. And I think that it's often compounded by the fact that first trimester can be terribly challenging from a morning sickness or all-day sickness, and nausea and vomiting in pregnancy perspective. So not only are your demands for nutrients increased, but also all weekend stomach is, for 80% of women who are pregnant, beige carbohydrates. So that can be a real challenge. Again, that is, I guess, another reason why optimizing your nutrition prior to conception is so important, because you're going into a pregnancy with optimal nutrient stores. Yeah. Okay, next question. I experience very painful periods for the first 2 days and experience a lot of bloating pre-period and also around ovulation. I'm on the wait list for a laparoscopy to check for endo. I eat mainly a plant-based diet and get lots of exercise. Keen to hear what you might recommend to help with the bloating and pain. Completely depends on what I would uncover in a nutrition assessment. So I can't give individualized advice without having an assessment. But, bloating, pain, massive symptoms that hugely improve in clients that we work with. We see a huge benefit in these sorts of things. So you can get symptom control. It's absolutely possible. And it doesn't have to be crazy restrictive either. But really the best way to do that, and the only way that I can offer you guidance around that, is by doing a nutrition assessment, because your nutrition requirements might be very different to somebody else's, particularly when you then add in medical conditions. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I can't really answer that question for you. Yes. Could you describe a good day on the plate on the Mediterranean diet? Yes, absolutely. So a day on the plate would look like, breakfast, you might have some overnight oats. So you're starting with a whole grain, and you could include some whole fat dairy products like a great probiotic yogurt, whole fat milk, and fruit. So you might do some frozen raspberries, which are an amazing source of antioxidants, and also some plant-based proteins such as chia seeds, which are also really rich in omega-3s. You can add some cinnamon for some polyphenols, which are great for your gut microbiome. So that would be a really delicious start to your day for a breakfast. Morning tea, you could have, if you're a morning tea person, you might have a piece of fruit. And for lunch, I'm a big fan of the Nourish Bowls. So the Nourish Bowl would be a whole grain, so it could be some quinoa, a source of protein. It might be some salmon, and then half a plate of lots of low starch vegetables. So we're looking at you could have anything from broccoli to grated beetroot, cherry tomatoes, cucumber, grated courgette. So the more variety you have, the better. The more color you have, the better. And you could do a quarter of a cup of edamame beans on that as well, with a good drizzle of extra virgin olive oil. And then for afternoon tea, you might have some cheese and crackers and a handful of nuts, unsalted. You might choose something like a Vita wheat cracker, which is really high fiber. And for dinner, you could have a a venison and lentil bolognese. So you could be choosing a wholemeal spaghetti, which is higher in fiber, or a pulse pasta, and you could include lentils in with your bolognese, again with a lot of vegetables, grated carrot, mushroom, tomatoes, capsicum, and fennel seeds and sweet dried basil, garlic, onion, as a way to get a lot of those low starch vegetables in. So that would be an example of a day on your plate for a Mediterranean way of eating, and obviously cooking your bolognese with extra virgin olive oil. So I think we've got time for one last question. So in general terms, are there any changes good to make while on IVF meds? So I break down IVF into 4 stages. So you've got the optimizing egg and sperm quality stage, which is stage 1, and that's 3 months before egg collection. And then in the preparing your uterine lining, if you're starting your IVF meds, if you've started those, then that's where you will be at the moment. And then we have the 2-week wait stage, and then the early pregnancy stage. So in terms of if you've started your IVF meds, I would be actually focusing on hydration, eating consistently, so you're getting a consistent, even blood sugar supply, and you're not getting big spikes in insulin. And I would be incorporating salmon if you can twice a week, and getting some fruit in your diet, as well as some vegetables at each meal. So you might be including some berries for antioxidants, and including some spinach and other vegetables at both lunch and dinner. But yeah, hydration and consistency, thinking about the things that you can control and what feels achievable for you at this stage in the game.
Thanks, Claudia. That looks like that's all of the questions we have for tonight. So, thank you so much. What a great presentation. And I really love
webinar introductions.
Oh, sorry about
Nutrition
that.
and fertility.
Sorry about that, guys. And I love the question about the describe a good day of Mediterranean diet as well. That was really helpful. So thank you very much. So yeah, I just really wanted to thank you tonight for your time as well, Claudia. So yeah, again, thoroughly good webinar. And that's it for us for tonight. So I would like to wish everybody a good night, and thank you for joining us. And yeah, we look forward to next month as well. Our next webinar will be on wellness, and I hope you can join us for that webinar as well. So thanks, Claudia, and we'll catch you soon.
Yeah, thank you, Kate.
Bye.
Bye-bye.